Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting, Capital One Bank, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, the Wickoff Group, Greenberg Traurig, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Colliers International New York, Cushman Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, DDG, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katsimatidis, Red Apple Group, Corman Communities, a.k.a. Hotels, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Popular Community Bank, Sterling & Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, and These Friends.
Can you imagine 25 million square feet of potential office space? Thousands of residential apartments, retail, hotel. Where am I talking? I'm not talking about another state. I'm talking about the west side of New York. And that's what's happening today and over the next couple of years on the west side. To tell us a little bit about that, I've assembled 4 great individuals who are so involved with what's happening on the west side. My guests today include Joseph Moinian, who's the president and CEO of the Moinian Group, Phil Wharton, who's the senior vice president for development at Brookfield Office Properties, Chris Albanese, who's the president of the Albanese Organization, and last but not least, my good friend Bruce Mosler, who's the chairman of global brokerage at Cushman Wakefield. So Joseph, you know, it's so interesting. We were talking prior to the show that many years ago, I worked for a period of about 4 years at a company called Hartfield Zodies, who was headquartered on 34th Street and 9th Avenue. And literally at that time you were involved with the apparel industry. There was nobody who would, going to 9th Avenue and 34th Street, this wasn't anything. I mean, there was the property that Brookfield, which wasn't owned by that, where they had a sky rink, they had other things. But what happened? I mean, and you've been involved with this market so many years. You first made your stake 25 years ago. So talk about what you're doing and what's happening at 3 Hudson Boulevard.
Mike, you're so right. I used to go also to learner shops, who was at 450 West 33rd Street at that time. And those areas.
Say, who's making the schlep? What is this over here?
Exactly. It was considered really out of town at that time. So we are involved for the last almost 20 years on the west side of Manhattan. We bought almost 20 years ago from Cushman Wakefield a site which was called a Hub Electric warehouse and manufacturing building on West 34th Street and 11th Avenue, which we had to give back to the city for the Hudson Boulevard, and we did all the high-tech buildings over at the west side, which we also lost in the condemnation. But we have been very, very active on the west side. This is before the rezoning of the city planning. This is before the High Line started. I always cared and loved the area, the view. I always considered the only area of Manhattan that can be redeveloped and developed to a high standard.
If you look at what you did and Larry Silverstein did on 42nd Street, I mean, Yale Trucking, remember that?
Of course.
The name of the past. Yale Trucking was over there. It's too young for him. Albanese wouldn't know about this. But, you know, Yale Trucking, and they had the Yale Trucking, and there was a parking lot.
Yes.
And I remember when
the
I
warehouse.
first, the warehouse, and then became a parking lot, and it had a very other distinction. It was the cheapest parking lot in the borough of Manhattan because it was so far over on the west side. It was an open parking lot. And then you know, Larry built Silver Towers, and you built the Atelier.
Atelier.
Okay, and now, a condominium, and now you're building a residential 80-20
Rental
over
building,
there.
yes.
So, you know, but there's so much. Now, Phil, you know, Brookfield, who's been around for many years in reincarnations, but over the last 20 years, literally, you know, has owned this property for how many years themselves?
Well, not the entire property, but
Right,
the first piece of it, 20 years.
Right, and so what is Brookfield planning over there?
Well, we own the land on two sides, 31st and 33rd Street, and from 9th to 10th. And we own over the rail yards. In fact, the rail yards have an easement with us. And so we're first building a platform that's going to extend from 31st to 33rd Street. And then we'll have 4 building sites, which will be a combination of office, residential, some retail, maybe a hotel. And then the middle, which is really 32nd Street, we're going to put back onto the grid so that you'll be able to come from Penn Station, Moynihan Station, down 32nd Street through our site, and then right at the end you'll be at the High Line and the entrance to the Hudson Yards. So we're kind of the front door, I would say, of the Hudson Yards project, of the whole area.
You know, we bring up the High Line. Chris, let's talk about you and the High Line and the two developments you have over here.
Yes, we had been scouring that area, West Chelsea,
It's
for a long
interesting,
time.
you know, for people from Long Island, you know, they were allowed in to come across state lines, you know.
And so our first purchase was the Chelsea Art Museum, which was in bankruptcy. And it's a small building on the corner of 11th and 22nd, but once we started reaching out to tenants, we were amazed of how many tech tenants and media tenants wanted to be in that area. So we leased that building, the entire building, to Hewlett-Packard for their Experience Center. And then we started looking for more property, and we bought a large tract on the High Line going from 21st to 22nd Street. We hired Rick Cook of Cook Plus Fox, who designed Bank of America Tower, to design us a little jewel Class A office building that sits on the High Line, which really would be the first of its kind. And we just launched our leasing program, and again, we're really shocked by how many media tenants and tech tenants are coming after us.
Now, here's the question, and, you know, Bruce can answer, and everyone. You know, it's potentially, over a period of time, it's 25 million square feet of office space. There hasn't been this type of development in one section of the city of Manhattan ever. Okay, you know, Rock Center was 8.5 million, the Trade Center was 12 million. I mean, this is an enormous, coupled with, let's also do remember that the Trade Center is still under development and there's going to be office space. The old comment, you know, it's like the Field of Dreams question. If we build it, will they come?
The Midtown office market in Midtown South is 300 million square feet. So that's sort of the base. So 20 million in any other city would be huge. In New York, it's big, but it's not, you know, you can see how it would grow. You'd grow into that. You've got transportation at Penn Station that's really underutilized. It's the #1 transport hub in the United States. Long Island Railroad.
That's right.
Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, all the subways. So you have it right there. And you have this analogy that I like to make, but actually Dan Doctorow was the first one to make it, which was 100 years ago when they were finishing Grand Central Station. They built a platform over rail yards from 42nd Street to 56th Street and created Park Avenue 100 years ago.
And
so I think, you know, we're in for that again.
And I'm going to
That's the analogy.
piggyback off of what Phil said and say, let's just put this in perspective. The average age of Midtown property today, and there's the high, the low, and the in-between, but the mean age is better than 50 years, closer to 75.
So it's
truth
closer
be
to
told.
your age.
It's thank you very much for that.
You're
Michael.
obsolete.
In reality, with the average age of property being
Somebody told me I hadn't been bantering enough.
at 50 or 75 years, we need new product. Why do we need new product? Tenants today in the marketplace need efficient, floor space. To get that efficient floor space, they have to move west. There has been a gravitation west for tenancies over the last 20 years. Times Square happened. George Klein was really, if you will, the pioneer there who cleared the way. Times Square took off because tenants needed new efficient floor plates. Times Square today is, in and of itself, an established marketplace.
See, but I think, you know, you bring up a very interesting thing, and I mean, even though Times Square has a lot of transportation, it doesn't have as much as this location. I mean,
That's correct.
Okay, this has a larger amount of location, and I think when you bring up the fact that New Jersey Transit, Amtrak, everything comes in here, we're talking about the center of the city. We're also talking of you know, an entertainment center. You know, Madison Square Garden is in this market, just the large facility. The Javits Center is right across the street from Joe's property.
Between the High Line and
Joe's going to have the
Station,
7 line right in his
That's
building.
right.
so
You're
that's gonna
not
add-
pioneering here. The infrastructure is in place. Transportationally, you have great access. Even retail sits at the, if you will, front door.
But you know, you bring up a good, interesting thing, and we would briefly talk
I don't want you to
about-
credit me too
I
much.
won't give you much
All right,
credit on this.
all right.
I don't believe that this could have happened on the other side of the city with regard to, okay, we take the 34th Street to 42nd Street corridor where Solo has the sites over there, which is under contract for sale.
Right.
That neighborhood does not have the transportation hub.
That's
That
correct.
doesn't have that
correct.
ability over there. Here you have the ability. You have the subway. You know, people, when you have to go to the NYU Medical Center or to where your daughter was bas mitzvahed over there, it's nice over there, but there's nothing there. Okay?
First Avenue is tough to get. First
correct.
Avenue is tough to get to.
That's exactly
Right. So you're talking about a transportation capability, the possibility of transportation, which is a very important situation. I think what also is bringing out something is, you know, even when the Caledonia was built by Taconic and their partner Related, that was the first residential truly on the High Line over there. You know, I mean, there was other thing, new construction over there. I think what you're what you did on 42nd Street and the capability of what Brookfield's going to be doing for residential. We need new residential. There is no question that the city needs new residential property, and this is going to be able to take care of it. Now, I hear in your conversation rental. What about the idea of condos on the west side? I mean, you did it on 42nd Street very successfully.
Very successfully. We built a 478 apartment condominium that was sold out, which was the first phase of a 2-phase rental condominium, which we started the residential rental part right now of a big building. And I think condominiums will do very, very well in the west side. We did well. There's no reason why anyone else shouldn't do well. But I think today the need for rental apartments are very, very strong, and the programs that the city offers, the state offers in terms of 80/20 and other tax incentives are very attractive, and that's what the rentals are being.
You know, when when we talk about, you know, the Albanese Organization, in addition to being major owners in Long Island, they've been the visionaries in downtown, in Battery Park City, with the Visionary and other projects, because you've seen it over there in a different neighborhood. So if you take what happened in Battery Park City, and you look at that, which was nothing. I still remember when the first Left Rack building, which was an FHA type of property, and they made a city over there. I mean, truly a city over here that I believe that you're going to see another city. I mean, you know, we haven't discussed the Related, because Hudson Yards is what, 8 million square feet within
Roughly.
in their city.
People want to be close to parks and close to the waterfront.
Yes.
That's what Battery Park City offers. That's what the West Side will offer.
Yes.
I mean, the High Line, people don't realize, the High Line connects the Hudson Yards to the Meatpacking District.
Yes.
So you
right.
can, if you live or work in the Hudson Yards, after work, you can walk on the High Line, no traffic, no bicycles, walk to West Chelsea, walk down to the Meatpacking District and have dinner. That's very
with
unique.
retail, with restaurants, with
In the Meatpacking
hotels.
District. Now, here's the interesting situation. A couple of months ago, I had Steven Starr on of Star Restaurants, who's Budokan Morimoto. okay, and he's also at the museum now at the Historical Society. Budokan is 550 seats, and I was saying to him, restaurants are, it's very difficult for a restaurant to make it on one meal because you need, and he said, I make it. I said, but you have an institution, Budokan of 450 people, it's a big one. The meatpacking district really doesn't have a lunch crowd in those restaurants over here. What you're going to see on the west side is you're going to have people working here. Living is one thing. People visiting and working are a different thing. When you make this a true 24/7 community, it's really a different thing. So what type of, what kind of retail do you think we can see everybody's talking a lot, especially near your property, 3 Columbus, over there with the Nordstroms.
Right.
Nordstrom's is going to be a block away. Do you see that type of retailer? Do you see maybe a Caldor, not a Caldor, I mean a Target who's done rather well in the city of New York, maybe coming to the Hudson Yards area?
Mike, I think the developers right now, including myself, we are all Brookfield, everyone, we are preparing ourselves for the next wave in the business, which starts with the commercial. As you said, the means of transportation is being completed or is there already, and the residential is happening.
But you bring up, and I have to bring this up, it's wonderful that the transportation is going to go to 34th Street and 11th, because it's going to help everybody over here.
Yes.
I mean, even on yours, because you have the 8th Avenue. But we have that possibility, that opportunity on 42nd Street and 11th Avenue.
Right.
The tunnel, 41st Street and 11th. You have the capability.
Yes.
And there's a need.
To have a station.
To have that, because,
totally.
Okay, because of the apartments. I mean, you have all these buildings over there on 11th Avenue and 37th, 38th, and 39th Street.
Right.
And what's holding this up?
I think it's a question of budget for the Hudson Yard Development Corporation. I think, I don't know if anything is going to happen in 2013, but I think 14 and 15, there will be hopefully modification to give a train station to a existing living 30 to 40,000 people in the immediate area of that location, which is really necessary for...
right, because if somebody's living on 42nd Street and if they want to go to Hudson Yards and they don't want to walk over there, at least there's the capability, on that situation.
Right.
Let's talk about hospitality in the market. You're building a new hotel right now.
Yes, we're under construction for a 300-room Hilton Homewood Suites on 37th Street between 8th and 9th. And, what drew us to that location is the Hudson Yards. I mean, obviously there are a lot of expensive hotels in Midtown, but right now there aren't that many.
Do you realize statistically, and I'm not a statistician, sometimes, when I have Bruce and Jim Q on, we have the statistical information.
We'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get to that. The largest number of new hotels and the occupancy is in the Times Square area, and that's considered in the Times Square district of what's going on. Now, we brought up the fact before about you might build a hotel.
We might. I mean, we wouldn't build it ourselves, but we've
Right.
had inquiries from hotel operators and developers, and we think it would be a good thing for the neighborhood. So
Bruce,
we're open to it.
Coach signed a lease, not a lease. Coach is buying their property, right? They're buying.
That's what the
Condo
right.
was,
yeah.
That's okay. Who do you see as the next potential type of tenant? Do you see a Morgan Stanley? Do you see a major bank, or someone going into the neighborhood? I know they'd love to find into his property. I'm not saying whose, but either one is a great property.
Well, it better be our property. You're looking for us.
Let's take a half step back and just talk about what happened. In 2012, we had 23 million square feet leased. That was
Now he's doing statistics.
I told you
Okay.
we'd get to that. But that was a average year. Wasn't a high or a low. We had an extraordinary year in 11 with 30 million. But at the end of the day, in 12 we had 23 million. It was an average year. My view, there's some pent-up demand. There's no question that the financial service sector is going to look at these properties because there's an ability to deliver very large floor plates at a very efficient level. The financial services industry, even while it is right now, call it in a hold mode till they get more clarity on the major issues that they're struggling with, be it the sovereign debt issue or in the United States, Dodd-Frank. They are out there looking for more efficient ways to downsize their business, and that bodes very well for the West Side because that is the bogey for where they would like to be. At the end of the day, we have some pent-up demand. I think 13 is going to be a better year, and the West Side continues to
the
be
West Side,
where they need to be.
If somebody can move into your office building, it's not really until 2015-16, right?
Well, between 4 million square feet that we have planned or in construction along 11th Avenue, which is residential, retail, parking,
But I'm
office.
talking about office.
I
But
think
Joe,
the
to be
first
there
office
in 15 or 16, they have to make a decision.
Right.
13.
I'm not
Yes,
questioning,
no,
but,
no,
but,
no
but,
question.
but I think people
We
have
will-
to be realistic. We're talking about it's
It's
15
take
and
some
16.
time.
It's going to
Correct.
take some
Take
time.
some
Sure.
Your building could be earlier.
Yes.
Okay,
We
so
can
that-
take
and
the
you're a
tenant
different
on 16 because we don't have to build the platform, and all we have to do is to finish our foundation that's happening right now in conjunction with the train station that's beneath our building. So that would give us, we cannot do anything immediately, but from 14 to 16, we can,
Right.
we can
And
build
Now,
this.
if we follow the conceptual idea of what happened in Times Square, the main buildings that were built in Times Square were really built for major tenants taking a lot of space. Reuters space,
That's right.
Condé Nast space,
right.
Bank of America space, Ernst & Young space. These were all buildings for one major tenant, okay, with the exception of 11 Times Square, which was originally built on spec, and then, then you had Proskauer, and now you're going to have Microsoft. So, but we have a different time today.
We do.
We were talking about, that was one time, and then if you really go back to the last time that we've had this type of development was Times Square, not 42nd Street, in the 80s, right? And then that was a time when bankers,
spec.
it was all spec, it was a
Yeah.
different market over here.
And we all learned the lesson not to do that.
That's right. And if we didn't learn the lesson, then the financial institutions made sure.
That's right.
But look, couple things. I think the city today is more robust and diverse in its tenancy.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, I think you have to recognize, Michael, that as tenancies have looked to build efficient but also environmentally safe space for their clientele, they're looking for a different kind of construct than they did in the past. So existing buildings are going to struggle to get to, I think, reach the needs of some of their tenants. So by definition, we're going to see some relocation simply by how their needs have changed, how the technologies have allowed new buildings to be, I think, more attractive. There's going to be a change between the tech sector, between the communications sector, and the financial service sector. There is demand in the marketplace. And one other point, not all these properties will go up at once.
I'm not
Some
disagreeing,
are going to be
but I'm
more
also
prepared
thinking,
to do it.
and I'm also thinking because Brookfield has some property in Midtown. There are other, you bring up the fact before that I kibitzed and joked about, the age of the buildings. Now, if you really look at it, and I agree with you 100%, part of another idea is the zoning in Midtown. Where you're going to be taking other buildings where you're going to be building up high or destroying those buildings and rebuilding over here. I think that's a very important fact in the city. It's also going to help this market because it helps the Midtown market in general.
Sure
Do you see perhaps what happened, and you were involved as one of the visionaries in Lower Manhattan, do you see some of these obsolete buildings being utilized as rentals? In the rental buildings, okay?
Maybe,
if there were incentives, because that's the only way they were built.
We went through that rotation in downtown,
And it did a great job.
And now is time for the professionals to make sure that the buildings in downtown that are really gorgeous be occupied, and they are getting occupied, and we're making a good progress. And I think next would be, as part of that rotation, the Midtown obsolete building, as Bruce mentioned, who knows very, very well about this. They're going to move westward to efficient building with the right floor plan. And then comes the third part.
I think you'll see Midtown office buildings, the ones that are obsolete, get converted to residential if they're well located.
Or get knocked down.
Or
get knocked down.
We'll see.
Or get knocked down for the new zoning.
It also
talking
depends on the
about-
vintage of the building, because the downtown buildings that got converted were these nice, charming, old-fashioned buildings with very small floor plates. and they lent themselves really well to rentals.
Right, because you know the
Midtown
loss factor that you have on a midtown building, it's maybe too wide, and then the
Right.
fact that
That's
you have
right.
to have windows and you have other situations over
That's
there.
right.
But Mike, we don't have a tax incentive
But
in
you have
place.
you don't on that,
on a-
but
on a
you do have a
conversion.
tax incentive of what you said to me before
Right.
on Hudson Yards,
Oh,
which
for
I think is
sure.
very important for people because a tenant is paying rent, and they pay rent, which real estate taxes. If they go into Chris's new building in the Highline where everyone wants to be, they're going to pay full taxes. If they go into the Brookfield building, they're going to get a 25% on the office building. If they go into Gary Barnett, the next property, they're going to get a 30%. They're going to get a 40% potential, and I believe people have to look at rent.
Yep.
As you're probably one of the leading leasing executives in the world, they look at rent with what the cost is. You know, it's the cost is not the rent; it's the cost of everything else.
But let's talk about that for a minute. If you look at, first of all, I'd make one point because I think Joseph touched on this, but I think when you look at what we can do on the Brookfield site, we can, first of all, the buildings are going to be built on bedrock. Secondly, the investment in the platform is going to allow us to deliver a property by the end of 16. So we're in pretty good shape as we look at that. I really think that as we look at New York City, the one thing that we haven't touched upon that I think is very important is we have a mayoral election coming up. And the city is now probably the most attractive place to be. Young people want to be here. The urban environment is what excites them. There's a boom in technology and in communications. The banking sector will recover. We have to be careful, just as this last mayor has been smart enough to incent new development, that with our new mayor, whoever he or she may be, that they realize the balance that has to be struck to continue to attract people to do business here and to continue to attract business.
The city must
want
be
to do business
proactive
here.
for business. Otherwise, there's no problem. Question.
100% right.
Well, what
I
about
like Bruce
okay.
to run for mayor.
Okay.
He knows exactly what has to be done. He's
The
so
Javits.
true.
You know, we talk about all the great situations on the West Side. Let me bring up one terrible situation, the Javits Center. I mean, I was there a couple of months ago. I went to the hospitality event.
Sure.
It's like going, it's
tough.
It's obsolete, even though it just doesn't work. Yeah. In a modest point of view, what should happen? Should they knock it down?
Mike, I have asked this question several times, and because I work with the architects that are doing the Javits and the contractors that are rebuilding the Javits, they have assured me that everything is in place to make sure Javits will be completed by the end of 2014, and it would be a Javits that you can almost not recognize. However, one thing that's not changing too much is the size of Javits.
Yes.
The size is not growing. It's
fundamental
growing
problem.
only what you see.
I mean,
but you're
what
going to
you-
see a very, very plushed green kind of Javits that is scheduled, and it is on a schedule and on budget to be completed mid to end 2014.
Now, the only thing that, you have Madison Square Garden, the only thing that we're missing is like a soccer, like a Red Bull Stadium or something like that, a little soccer arena.
They tried that,
You have
yeah.
everything else over there. I think, I think that everything, the die is cast. And, I think part of it was, like I said to you on 42nd Street over there, and then there was the other situation of, Jeff Levine and all the other properties in the High Line, and lots of things are going on. And I'm really happy that we've been able to talk about developments on the West Side, and hopefully in a couple of months you'll come
exciting.
back and we'll talk about
very
more exciting. I'd like to thank Joe Moinian, Phil Wharton, Chris Albanese, and Bruce Mosler, and I'll see you next week.